Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with all of you as we begin this 3-day online retreat on awakening self-kindness. Just as a technical note, we are doing the retreat itself on Zoom, and for recording purposes to make sure everything is right, that there's no interrupting sounds or anything like that. The function that would normally allow you to turn on your camera or to turn on your microphone is temporarily disabled. That's from our previous experience. So I hope you understand. Normally, of course, we would, if it was just a regular class or a webinar, we would enjoy seeing each other. However, to make sure these recordings really are perfectly usable later on when some people choose to use them for personal retreats and so forth, we decided to be a bit on the stricter side this time. With regards to your questions, comments, and so forth, it is okay to drop them in the chat. However, you can also email your questions with regards to the materials of this retreat, with regards to the themes that we're going to be covering, to me. You have all received an email from me, hopefully, with the links, with the Zoom link, with the schedule, and so on. So if you have any questions that come up throughout these sessions, please just email them back to me and I'll do my best to respond. In general, all the recordings of the retreat will be uploaded to Vimeo, and eventually it will all be uploaded to the CCN website, where you will be able to find it all as well. However, as we go through each session, the recordings will be uploaded. You'll be able to find them on Vimeo. You will be able to use them there. And some people have already informed us that they will be participating in the retreat, but asynchronously, meaning that they will be watching these sessions as they become available a little bit later on, because there's a huge time difference for some. However, it still means we're practicing in this one community, and we're doing something very meaningful in that we are indeed awakening self-kindness. So with regards to the themes that we're going to be covering, the main theme is self-kindness, but that, of course, from a Buddhist and from a psychological point of view as well, includes many different themes, many different topics, many different practices that can be done in order to indeed strengthen and manifest this quality of self-kindness. So we will be going through a sequence of practices. We will not just be doing self-directed loving kindness every time, even though that would be a very meaningful endeavor actually. But we will be embarking on a journey in which we go through a circle of practices, going slowly through different methods that would hopefully make us feel truly at peace, truly at ease, truly restful, and then over time we will keep strengthening such qualities strengthening our practice until we arrive at truly profound levels of self-kindness and self-compassion. That's the overall aspiration that we have for this retreat. In a way, retreat as a concept, as many people would know, means that we're retreating from something. The term Tibetans use for retreat is tsam, which literally means a boundary or a border. And the idea there is that we establish a boundary that protects us from something negative. That's the meaning that a very important teacher of the late 20th, early 21st century, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who passed away last year, used to assign to the idea of retreating from negativity, including the negative, non-virtuous habits of our body, speech, and mind. And in a way, that's very true in our case, in that we will do our best, hopefully, to retreat from negative habits with regards to how we treat ourselves, with regards to how we perceive ourselves, and then by extension with regards to how we treat others as well, by working on a profound quality of self-kindness and self-compassion. We slowly transform the overall relational realm within which we find ourselves, within which we exist. And we'll talk more about this relational realm, relational mindfulness, relational aspects of loving kindness, compassion, and so on. So we are retreating from something, and by retreating from that, we are cultivating something positive, something wholesome. However, another analogy, a metaphor that I would like to invite here or use here perhaps is sort of comparing this process, whether you're doing it in real time with all of us on Zoom or later on by using the recordings, maybe many years later by using the recordings on your own and retreating into a comfortable, beautiful, natural environment or a 5-star hotel or whatever it is that's available to you and whatever it is that you choose. Retreating into such a helpful, supportive environment and then just spending 3 days or more, because these recordings can be used in a slower manner, spending some days working on these transformative qualities by soaking our body, speech, and mind in such qualities as deep restfulness, as self-directed loving kindness, as self-compassion, as tenderness, as essence love, as wisdom, and so on. And we will be using all of these different categories of practice as we go along. So this idea of soaking, of truly absorbing, of relaxing in a field of transformative energy, so that slowly, some of the knots in our system, some of our physical knots, quite literally knots of tension in our body, but also mental knots, and we will talk about those as well, can gradually get transformed so that these knots come undone, so that we undo them quite literally, and then the energy of our tenderness, of our loving kindness, of our compassion can flow more freely. So this idea of soaking, of immersing ourselves into something, of being very gentle with it, and then through that achieving transformation. Let's play around with that a little bit as we go along. So for this reason, if you're doing this retreat in real time, or if you're taking the time to actually do this as a quote-unquote more or less formal retreat, meaning you're not just watching one session a day as you go through your daily activities, but you're truly taking the time to just focus on practicing, on journaling, and so on. If that's the case, then I would definitely invite all of us to be very gentle with ourselves, to not overburden ourselves, to try to not do too much in each day apart from these sessions, meaning not try and work on very elaborate projects, not try and clean the entire house and so on, but just truly be restful to the best of our ability. And even if we are just using this as sort of a learning seminar in a way, meaning we just watch one recording a day or even less than one a day, we just use this to learn about self-kindness, self-compassion, and so on, doing it slowly. Even then, if we're still, visiting the office, if we're still talking to people, we're still dealing with all of our daily projects, to the best of our ability, considering how we can still bring some levels of restfulness, some levels of gentleness into it all, and through that changing the fabric of our daily experience, changing the very field of relational interdependence within which we exist, so that once again that can have a deeper effect on our body, speech, and mind. So that's the overall invitation. Please be gentle with yourself. I'll try to be gentle with myself as well, to the best of my ability. And then through that, by sharing this attitude of gentleness, which is in no way equivalent to complacency or, self-indulgence, but through sharing this attitude of gentleness, we can perhaps transform something within ourselves. And this is where there is one more understanding of retreat that is perhaps of value. One of the teachers that I have had the fortune of interacting with over the years, a very experienced retreat practitioner from Scotland by the name of Donald Creedon, associated with the Samueling tradition and the Samueling monastery in Scotland, sometimes compares retreat to an alchemical space, a space within which we go in order to experience alchemical transformation. And that is true of most retreats, actually. We could be doing a writer's retreat, meaning we just retreat from everything that's distracting in order to work on our writing. Or a painter's retreat. We retreat from everything just to work on a specific artistic endeavor in terms of painting, drawing, creating sculptures, and so forth. We retreat from everything, and still, even though we're not meditating or anything else like that, even though we're not undertaking what would be considered to be spiritual practice, quote unquote, we are still leaving ourselves in a transformative space, and something mechanical can indeed happen. Well, even more so when we do actually do these practices of meditation, mind training, mind transformation, and so on. And this is exactly what we're doing in this case. These practices can have a huge alchemical effect on our body, speech, and mind, and that's what we are inviting here. With an attitude of gentleness, putting ourselves into a retreat container where this alchemical process of transformation can occur. And even though initially I, like most people, had doubts with regards to whether a 3-day online retreat can have such an effect on us, as opposed to, for example, an 8-week retreat, a 3-month retreat, a 3-year retreat that we would actually be doing in person, in a cave, or in a monastic setting. After we did our previous 3-day retreat in December, and that one was on purification practices and the practices of Buddha, Vajrasattva, and so forth. So methods deeply embedded into the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of mind training. After we did that, the feedback that we received was truly very impressive in that people were sharing that just those 3 days not only shifted their understanding of the methods that we were working with, shifted their understanding of Vajrasattva practice and so forth, but actually shifted something within how they feel, changed something about how this very reality appears, how it feels. So that was very impressive for me personally, and for that reason, I do believe that even a few sessions of online practice, if we do approach them with an attitude of curiosity, openness, gentle inquiry, can have a profound transformative effect on us. And this effect does not necessarily have to be immediately and apparently powerful in that, the clouds have parted and now I'm seeing it all clearly and now I finally love myself, yay. Not necessarily that. That would be a very powerful expectation to have, and in a way sort of self-defeating in that we expect too much and we're not giving it time, because self-kindness, as just like any other positive mental state, takes time. It takes time for us to cultivate such a state, to truly establish it deeply. So from that point of view, yes, we might not necessarily have these really fanciful expectations necessarily, but we know something will be gradually changing within us. We are performing these practices, we are planting these seeds, we're being open to see the result. And once again, at the end of the process, we might see some shifts, some changes, or at least we might feel more restful, which is in itself such a hugely rewarding achievement. If we are indeed tired, exhausted, feeling somewhat down, because it's the winter season for many of us, at least those in the northern hemisphere, if we are feeling somewhat, worn down by reality and our personal decades of struggles, to truly immerse ourselves in a field of self-kindness, being supported by the community and also supported by the lineages that brought us these practices, immersing ourselves in that, soaking our body, speech, and mind in this energy of self-directed kindness. That can be a very powerful and transformative experience as well. So let's be open with it. Let's play with it. Playfulness is one of the facets of loving kindness and self-directed loving kindness and self-compassion as well. Let's see where it takes us. Let's not necessarily have any big expectations, but let's also know that everything we're doing here will have an effect, because we are accumulating minutes of mind training. And so in order to give some direction to this process of mind training, in order to establish intentions for where we want to go eventually, we will start with a meditation practice that will be very deeply familiar to most of those present, or at least to those who have been studying with Lama Alan Wallace for a while. we will be starting with the very familiar practice, or the fourfold vision quest, in which we explore our aspirations. We explore the processes occurring in our cognitive domain, the domain of our desires, wishes, aspirations, and so on. And we will also be starting our remaining 2 days by doing the very same meditation. But later on, throughout the retreat and all the other sessions, we will continue working primarily with this domain of intentionality, with the domain of motivation, with the domain of wishes, aspirations, intentions, and so on, even though other aspects of our mind will also be implicated in the process. So it becomes sort of the main field on which we're focusing for the remainder of this retreat, and for that reason, because we will be working with it so closely, the original intentions, aspirations, and ideas that come up in this very meditation might later shift. And no big deal. Wonderful. That evolution is what we do want to actually see. If they remain the same, also perfectly fine. That just means they're still valid for us. But all this is to say, this meditation is once again just a playful exercise that we do, not necessarily expecting ultimate answers to the 4 questions which we explore. We're just relaxing deeply, and we're allowing the deeper levels of our mind to present us with a meaningful vision of something that we could aspire for, of something that could be transformed, of something that could be experienced. So that's the general idea. So throughout the retreat, we will be again and again going into meditation. In this session itself, we will do quite a lot of meditation because this is a firmly practice-oriented retreat. I will be sharing some prompts, some ideas, some general suggestions, some quotes, and some practical explanations, practice-related explanations, but overall we will be accumulating quite a lot of many minutes of practice. And so for that reason, it does make sense to establish a practice nest for yourself, a comfortable seat, or indeed a nest, that you will be using for meditation throughout this retreat. And depending on your personal preferences, this can be a meditation nest that's primarily catering to you practicing in the upright position, if you prefer to mostly be seated while practicing. But it can also be a meditation nest that supports your practice in the supine position, and that's what's primarily comfortable for you personally. So a meditation nest that is comfortable for you to lie down in the Shavasana position, lying flat on your back, and meditating in that position if that's what's best suited for your practice. But a space of comfort, a space of gentleness, a space in which you are already feeling held by this little bubble of reality that you've created for your practice as a supportive space. So for me personally, for example, I have a meditation cushion that's supporting me. I have a blanket over my knees just to feel warm. In case I need some back support, I have a couple of pillows behind me. I'm not leaning on them yet, but I might later need to support my back that way. I have a little bit of tea next to me, to sustain me while I'm guiding these meditations. So I'm feeling relatively comfortable and supported by my personal meditation nest. I'm also loving how there's lots of green in the frame. Green is my favorite color, and the favorite color of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So once again, that gives me some joy, and hopefully it does not annoy you too much. And so from that point of view, I've created a meditation nest for myself. So later on, or right now, if you feel inspired to, you can rearrange, the pieces of furniture, the cushions and everything, the blankets, so that they support you as well. So that already, in terms of the environment, because that very strongly affects the state of our mind as well, you feel held by something imbued with kindness and potentially beauty. And with that invitation, we will be going straight into the meditation on the fourfold vision quest itself. So please find a comfortable stationary position, either upright or supine. And then let's spend a few moments adjusting our physical posture. Depending on which position we choose, of course, the specific elements of the body that we check and adjust might be different, but an overall general suggestion is to very gently elongate the spine if possible, to make sure our shoulders are relaxed, to slightly tuck in our chin, to position our hands comfortably, to make sure our legs are comfortable as well, resting nicely and supporting us. And then once this process of adjusting is finished, bringing our awareness into the field of the body, the tactile field of the body, and starting to observe the tactile sensations arising in the body. In particular, first attending to the parts of the body that are currently in contact with the ground. Noticing the contact between us and the element of earth that's holding us. Noticing the firmness and the stability there. Allowing ourselves to actually entrust ourselves to the ground. Relaxing deeply into this very experience of being held, being supported. And in this act of entrustment, initiating the process of profound relaxation by releasing some of the physical tension, some of the muscle tension that we find in our feet and toes, in our legs in general. And then in and around our pelvic floor. Throughout our torso. And there we can first explore our abdominal muscles and our lower back, and then gently come up to our chest level, exploring the chest, eventually arriving at our shoulders. And then relaxing our upper arms, forearms, and our hands and fingers. Spending some time in that area, truly enjoying the process of relaxation and the stillness of our hands and fingers right now. And from there, returning to our shoulders. Exploring the experiences around our neck and throat. The backside of our head. Our crown. And finally, our facial muscles. Then, extending our awareness to the entirety of the body, all of its tactile experiences, all of the sensations arising in this vast tactile field, and enjoying an opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the field of the body. Perhaps in a new way, because here we will be enjoying the process of being in contact with the body by bringing in an attitude of tenderness, an attitude of self-directed loving kindness, an attitude of appreciation. Training in all of those attitudes individually later on, but for now just enjoying the very fact that we have this very body that is so valuable in terms of being a wonderful tool for goodness when we use it that way. Allowing the body to breathe naturally, to continue expanding and contracting with each new cycle of breathing, as we observe the tactile sensations associated with this process of breathing. And then with our body resting in this manner, we perform the actual fourfold vision quest. A contemplative practice in which we explore 4 questions related to our well-being, presenting these questions to our mind, to the deeper levels of our own mind, to our deeper intuitive levels of understanding, and then allowing certain vision, certain general understanding to emerge each time, so that we can respond to that general vision with the attitude of loving kindness. And the first question that we explore is, how do I personally envision genuine flourishing, genuine well-being? that I would like to realize one day. What is that genuine well-being that I would like to one day experience? Allowing a certain general idea, a certain general understanding to emerge. And once that happens, responding to that general idea or vision, however vague, with the aspiration of self-directed loving kindness, meaning with a wish for our own happiness. Wishing, may it be so. May I realize this genuine well-being. Generating this wish and then strengthening it with each new exhalation, as if we were breathing life into this vision, allowing it to manifest more and more vividly in the field of our experience. And yet maintaining the flow of the wish itself. May it be so. And as we continue wishing, as we maintain the flow of the wish itself, may it be so, for a little while even imagining perhaps that we have indeed realized this desired state of genuine flourishing, genuine well-being. And then seeing, how would that feel for me? What would that feel like? And from there, gently moving on to the second question, asking ourselves, what types of support, what types of resources do I need from the world around me in order to arrive at this genuine well-being, this genuine flourishing? What types of support do I need from other people and from the world itself? And so, presenting this question to our mind, to the depths of our mind, and then allowing for a certain general understanding to emerge. And then responding to this general understanding with a wish of, may it be so. may I indeed receive all these types of support. Breathing naturally, maintaining the flow of this wish, but if we want, imagining that with each in-breath, we're drawing these types of support, drawing these types of assistance closer and closer to ourselves. All with this foundational wish of, may it be so. Using each in-breath as an invitation and resting in the flow of the wish itself. May it be so. May I receive all the types of support and assistance, and be able to actually accept them. And even imagining that we have accepted those types of support, we have received them. What would that feel like for us? Imagining that. Then, moving on to the third question. How do I need to change and transform in order to experience this genuine well-being, in order to arrive at this state of flourishing? How do my habits need to change? Once again, planting the seed of this question in the depths of our mind and allowing for a certain general idea, general vision to emerge. And then responding to that with a gentle wish of, may it be so. Breathing naturally, maintaining the wish, and imagining that with each in-breath, with each out-breath, the destructive habits fall away, the positive habits are strengthened, and through that greater and greater degrees of well-being are experienced, are brought about. As if a flower was opening its petals, as if our deepest potential was gradually being uncovered. And then finally, for the fourth question, asking ourselves, what gift What meaningful gift can I offer to the world within this vision of genuine flourishing, in the context of this vision? What would be my most meaningful contribution to the lives of others, to the overall fabric of interdependence? And once again, when a certain general idea arises, an understanding of what our meaningful contribution could be, responding to that with "may it be so." And using each exhalation to imagine that we are indeed extending this gift to others, and through that transforming their lived reality. Eventually imagining that all beings have received our gift, that the overall field or fabric of interdependence has been saturated with this meaningful contribution of ours, bringing greater freedom and greater happiness to all who live. And then releasing the images, the aspirations, the wishes, the intentions to simply rest in openness and clarity. Then coming back to our body to ground ourselves there. Noticing the sensations, the experiences of the body, especially the experience of being held by the ground. Then introducing a tiny bit of movement into the system of the body by perhaps rocking back and forth, slowly and gently moving our fingers, even our toes if we want. Our shoulders, reactivating the facial muscles, opening our eyes, and slowly concluding the meditation as we return to our physical space and to our shared online space of practice. And just as a facetious technical note, while you're hopefully stretching, moving, drinking some water, just making yourselves comfortable. As a facetious side note, each time we complete a meditation, I will be doing the very familiar gesture of Anjali, bringing my palms together in front of my chest, which in generally the cultures of the Indian subcontinent, but by extension many other regions of Asia as well, and these days globally, is a way of saluting the inner goodness within each being. Normally, it kind of implies that we're bowing to the divine presence within each and every being, or Buddha nature within each and every being. But in this case, quite powerfully, because we are first focusing on self-kindness here in order to establish a truly solid foundation for universal kindness, relational kindness. Here it is also a salutation to the basic goodness within each and every one of us. So bowing down to our deepest potential. Wow, how marvelous. So that's kind of the meaning. There's nothing magical to that gesture, just symbolic, but I think it's quite meaningful for me personally. But there's, of course, no expectation whatsoever with regards to anyone else doing it. I will keep doing it because I like it and it reminds me of that basic goodness, which is kind of the core concept for this exploration that we're going to be doing together. But before we go into the exploration of basic goodness, if you will, before we start unpacking those concepts and working with them more directly, it is actually meaningful to establish a very solid foundation right where we are. And as a person who's extremely interested in eco-dharma, or the application of dharma, Buddhist dharma, Hindu dharma, Jain dharma, Christian dharma, Muslim dharma, and so on, the application of dharma to the, once again, relational domain of ecology, environmentalism, our contact with nature, our relationship with nature, our place in nature, because we're also a part of nature as well, we as a species, we're as individuals, and so forth. As someone who's very deeply interested in that and is also interested in the teachings on contact with nature that exist within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, I find it very meaningful to start right where we are in terms of our contact with the 5 elements as we are embarking on the process of meditation or spiritual practice or contemplative practice. So this is where actually there would always, in my experience in the Tibetan tradition, be some explanations about relying on the foundation of the 5 elements in order to establish a healthy space for practice. Actually, in the more extensive retreat manuals that exist within the Tibetan tradition, we would be invited to perform quite a few actions related to the 5 elements to establish a firm basis for our practice. So we would be invited to, for example, choose a suitable spot on the ground. Then we would draw certain graphic symbols on that spot. Then we would place a couple of pieces of grass, and then on top of that grass, symbolically representing the straightness or the directness of our mind, we would place our meditation cushion. Then we would actually go around and at a certain point invite the inspiring, positive, supportive influence of symbolic figures that represent the 4 directions and the 4 elements, therefore, and so on. There would be quite a lot of, in a way, dancing around in order to create a positive, healthy space in which our body, when we sit down to meditate, would always be supported, would always be held, would always be balanced. And then when we actually begin the practice, we would start quite often by working with first the body itself to make sure it is stable and still like a giant majestic mountain. And then once the body is still like a majestic mountain, we would start working with the breath to make sure it's flowing freely and in a healing manner, actually, not simply not simply a positive, not simply a healthy way of breathing would be invited, not simply breathing that's, yes, uncontrived, hopefully freely flowing, not too energizing, but also not putting us to sleep, a perfect balance in terms of how our nervous system is aligned. Not simply that. We would ideally establish a pattern of breathing that is healing us more and more deeply with each inhalation and with each exhalation. That would be referred to as the key point of speech. So establishing the body as being like a majestic mountain would be described in this meditation instructions as focusing on the key point or quintessential point of the body. So establishing the stability, the firmness there. And then this work with regards to our breath, establishing a healthy way of breathing would be under the general heading of speech. So therefore the quintessential point related to our speech. And only after that would we embark on the process of establishing a truly wholesome motivation within our mind, and that would be referred to as the quintessential point or the key point of the mind. So in a way, quite a few of the things that we're going to be doing together in this retreat are about establishing wholesome attitudes, wholesome intentions, wholesome aspirations, and so forth, loving kindness, compassion, and all these practices belong to this general category of working with our cognitive domain. But before we start doing that, if we follow this logical sequence that is presented, at least in the Indo-Tibetan contemplative tradition, it would be good to first work with these preliminary points of body and speech. And the point of speech here, yes, it does refer to simply allowing our speech to be silent and going deeply into that experience of silence. Actually, we will play with that a bit. But in addition to that, allowing our breath to flow in a very natural, healing manner. And that's where I would invite us to begin this interplay between body and breath, allowing the body to rest like a majestic mountain, but allowing our breath to flow freely, and to also heal us, to balance our nervous system. Beginning there actually would already help us establish something that will be very important for this retreat and for all the practices that we're doing later. And this is a concept that researcher Paul Condon, who works with John McCransky, who is both a Buddhist scholar and a meditation teacher working primarily on the west coast of the United States, associated with Chogyam Rinpoche, who's one of my primary teachers. They, both John and Paul, refer to this concept that we're going to be working with a lot as field of care. Field of care. So field of care is a mental or energetic field of care that we rely on in our practices of first self-kindness, self-compassion, self-tenderness, and then in our practices of universal compassion, universal loving kindnesses, universal tenderness, and so forth. This field of care quite powerfully is present in meditations on our lineage, our spiritual lineage, for example, where we rely on the inspiring influence of our spiritual masters, our mentors in this very life, but also lineage masters that came before them, and then by extension, pretty much every realized being throughout the three times. That is a type of field of care. Beyond that, this field of care is also present in meditations in which we think or we contemplate the kindness of all sentient beings and how for us to even exist, for us to even be here, for us to possess these resources, for us to be able to join this retreat, incredible amounts of kindness had to be expressed by sentient beings who protected us, who led us on the path, who gave us food, who gave us clothing and shelter and medical care and so forth. So that becomes a point of contemplation. It's contemplated quite deeply, and from a certain point in this practice, we start feeling, yes, indeed, there is an incredible amount of kindness that is flowing through this reality, and I am actually very grateful for that. So a certain feeling of appreciation arises, and that is very meaningful for the ensuing practices of universal loving kindness, universal compassion, and so on. So that in itself is also a field of care. All sentient beings become a field of care because we have, at certain points, received kindness from all of them in one way or another. Beyond that, there are also practices in which this field of care arises for us because, for example, we imagine an actual or a symbolic figure that represents love, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, different manifestations or expressions of tenderness with regards to ourselves. So, for example, in some practices in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Himalayan tradition of Buddhism, people would imagine such figures as Tara, or Medicine Buddha, or the Buddha of Infinite Light, or the Buddha of Compassion in the space in front, and feel that there is a flow of care, a flow of tenderness, a flow of loving kindness, a flow of compassion that encompasses our body, speech, and mind, and we're held in that field of care. And we will actually experiment with all of these different methods, because in order to establish a truly solid experience of self-kindness, establishing this field of care is extremely important. That is something that has been established both historically in terms of these contemplative lineages that emphasized all of these different approaches to establishing field of care, even if the term itself, field of care, was not used. And then that is also something that was actually established by Paul Condon in his research, because that is something that working with this field of care, and then with the ensuing practices of universal loving kindness and so forth, that is something that has proven to be quite powerfully important in transforming our habits of relating to ourselves, our habits of relating to others. It certainly has a medical effect as well, a truly positive medical effect. It can transform our attachment style, meaning lead us away from being avoidant or anxious towards being truly attachment secure, and so forth. There's lots of benefits associated with that. And later on, after the retreat, we'll include some links to Paul's work and so forth that we can explore at a greater degree. But for now, one of the first ways, in my experience, to establish, from an Eco-Dharma point of view, of establishing this field of care is reminding ourselves how much care, or how much safety, how much stability we can already experience just in our contact with the element of earth that's holding us. And that's what's inviting us to be like a majestic mountain. And with the element of air that's moving through our body and is constantly not only keeping us alive, but also constantly rebalancing our nervous system. And there's an invitation there that is very strongly present in all the teachings on mindfulness of breathing. The invitation to truly entrust ourselves to this process deeply, to let go, to allow, to establish an uncontrived rhythm of breathing, an uncontrived manner of breathing, so that through that our nervous system can once again become truly balanced. The flow of pranas within our system, the flow of nervous energies within our system can become truly balanced and wholesome and supportive for everything else that we want to undertake on the path. All the other practices, including practices of actually cultivate that self-directed loving kindness, self-compassion, and so on. All of that would become powerful if right now we can entrust ourselves to this field of care that primarily consists of these two elements, earth and air, knowing that by extension there's also quite a lot of support that comes from the water in our body, and of course from the element of heat that's just keeping us warm in this regard. And then later on, if you do some periods of relaxation, let's say in a jacuzzi or in a hot tub, or if you sit under the sun and you absorb the sun's rays, these would also be similarly a field of care for you, where these elements, the elements of water, the element of fire, and of course the element of space that's holding us, all the five elements become a field of care as well. So right now we will do this practice of gently working with earth and air, simply observing them and allowing them to balance the workings of our nervous system, but with this attitude of doing it in order to arrive at greater degrees of well-being, allowing essentially the elemental energies, this natural energy that our bodies are made of, allowing it all to heal us, if that's the term we want to use. Some people do enjoy thinking of healing in this context, or to provide us with a sense of safety. That's another way of thinking of it, or to care for us, to provide care. That's another way of thinking. To bring balance, if that's what's inspiring for us. We can use any of these terms. I don't want to emphasize one over the others, because I know that each one of them can be negatively triggering to us at a certain point. Some people sometimes say, oh, that we talk about healing so much, can we just let it go already? It's like healing. How much healing can there be? You know, I'm not this constantly broken thing, so I don't need to constantly only talk about healing. And that's fine, that's valid. I also don't think we need to all the time talk about that. But at some points, thinking about healing can be extremely inspiring for some people. So if that's the case, then focus on that. Regardless of it all, the overall attitude is, hey, I will explore this field of care, this field of safety, and it will be very simple. I will be primarily working with the ground that's holding me and the breath that's flowing through my body, and I'll see where it takes me. So that's the invitation. So once again, let's stretch if we need to. That's also an act of self-kindness, self-compassion. And then once we are done with our stretching, let's find a comfortable stationary position. Arriving at a physical position that would support our body primarily, and by extension also our speech and mind. And then adjusting the different parts of the body in a way that would be most conducive, most supportive. If possible, very gently elongating the spine, making sure our shoulders are relaxed. Slightly tucking in our chin. Placing our hands comfortably. For some of us on our lap, for some our thighs or knees, or if we're practicing in the supine position, placing our hands to the sides of our body. And then bringing our awareness into the field of the body itself. Starting to observe the tactile sensations there. And first, noticing the parts of the body that are currently being held by the ground that's holding us. These experiences of firmness and stability in and around our legs, the backside of our legs, in our feet and toes as well. In our buttocks and in our pelvic floor. Noticing all of these sensations and, to the best of our ability, allowing the physical tension to slowly be released. Releasing it and enjoying the experience of relaxation. The restfulness that starts to encompass the lower half of our body. Bringing an experience of care. By releasing tension, by finding this sense of stability provided by the earth element, we are taking good care of our body already. By allowing it to rest in a truly profound way that for many of us might not even necessarily be available most of the time if we are habitually tense because of anxiety or busyness or different habits associated with tension. Here, it's as if the earth itself is providing us with a sense of safety and stability, and with an opportunity to relax deeply. So noticing the sensations and releasing more and more and more of the physical tension from the lower half of our body with each new out-breath. Then exploring the sensations throughout our torso. First in our abdomen and in our lower back. Then throughout our chest. Checking whether our shoulders can become even more deeply relaxed. And then bringing the same type of attention to our upper arms, our forearms, our hands and fingers, Once again, the firmness and the stability in our hands and fingers is an expression of the earth element. That's what the earth element is, firmness and stability. And so we can enjoy these experiences and then bring our awareness to our neck, the back side of our head, our crown, and our facial muscles. And here as well, checking to see whether there are experiences of firmness, stability, solidity of any kind. Knowing that these are as well expressions of the earth element. And then in extending our awareness to the entirety of the body, for a little while, primarily noticing the different expressions of this solidity. To feel that our body, even though it is a field that's constantly shifting and changing, that our body right now in the process of this meditation can rest like a majestic crystal mountain That's one of the traditional images used to describe this. Crystal, because there is an aspect of clarity, luminosity. We're not falling asleep, we're brightly aware, vividly aware. And yet still a majestic mountain that's restful, still, unbothered. Living its best life and simply resting and being at peace. So, releasing more and more deeply into this experience of solidity and firmness, stillness and restfulness. And then while allowing that undercurrent of stillness and stability to still be present, we gently bring our attention to the experiences associated with the process of breathing. The flow of the breathing energy within the field of the body, throughout the entire field of the body, not limiting ourselves to just the area of our nostrils or our abdominal area, but noticing how this breathing energy is flowing through the entirety of this field, gently expanding and contracting it with each inhalation and with each exhalation. And allowing this process to be as natural as possible, meaning we're not really interfering with it. We're not trying to manipulate the process of breathing, the rhythm, the volume, the depth. Rather, we are attending to our breath, which is an expression of the air or wind element, as a healing ally, a healing force of nature that's good for us. And that when we allow it to be truly natural and uncontrived, can heal us in deep and profound ways, rebalancing our nervous system, removing the knots of tension and the associated psychosomatic problems, removing our tension and anxiety. And so entrusting ourselves to this process of gentle, natural breathing while holding our awareness, our curious awareness, on the sensations that shift when the whole system, the whole field expands and contracts. Expanding with the inhalation, contracting gently with the exhalation. Taking us more and more deeply into an experience of restful ease, while also providing the necessary degree of clarity and vigilance, especially with the inhalation. Again and again, bringing our awareness to our healing ally, the breath, while being held by the earth, which is our other healing ally. And in this process of observing the breath, we're both training our attention, strengthening the qualities of mindfulness, introspection, and so on, and, indeed, establishing greater degrees of ease and balance with each new cycle of breathing. This already is a dual field of care. And implicated in that is the rest of the natural world. It finds its way into our body, which is also a part of the natural world, an expression of the natural world, through our very contact with the ground and through our very process of breathing. So we'll enjoy this quietly for 2 more minutes. And then, slowly and gently, we can introduce some movements to the body. Once again, with a curious, playful attitude, rocking back and forth, moving our fingers, moving our toes, reactivating our facial muscles, opening our eyes. And then taking some moments to conclude our practice, to transition back into our physical space and into our shared online space. Enjoying the variability to move that we have, the ability to breathe, and sometimes to be still as well. And so this is where I think it's quite meaningful to begin with our very physicality in a way, but not simply our physicality as, oh, what does my body consist of in terms of, vital organs and substances and different types of tissue and so forth. Even though there are practices that focus on that, and there's actually a lot of value in those practices as well, but focusing more on the fact that our bodies, since they are on loan from the 5 natural elements, and since they are an extension of the material energy of this very planet, our bodies have a connection to the field of care that is the 5 elements. And of course, not all of the expressions of the 5 elements are necessarily with regards to the safety of our body caring. When this very wind energy manifests as tornadoes and storms, or when the earth element is going through earthquakes, or when there's a major fire that burns a whole forest to ashes, obviously that's not the safest of fields to be in. But with all of that, we know when we attune ourselves to the safety and peacefulness of the natural world, when those qualities are actively present, or even when we connect to the 5 elements in an isolated manner, for example, by taking a hot shower whenever you're feeling like we have a cold, or, connecting to the water element in a hot tub, or enjoying the element of fire by sitting under the sun, and so forth. When we do this kind of homeopathic level when we employ this homeopathic level of connecting to the 5 elements, then they can have a very profoundly healing effect on us. And it is certainly the great discovery of most contemplative traditions of this world, including the Buddhist tradition quite powerfully, but beyond that also the Christian and the Sufi traditions as well, Hindu tradition, and beyond that the Taoist tradition. It is one of the major discoveries of all these yogic traditions of practice that err in particular when we focus on it, when we establish a natural rhythm of breathing, when we allow the breath to unfold naturally in an uncontrived manner, can be a very, very powerful healing ally. And we could all benefit from connecting to it. Therefore, the great emphasis that the Buddha placed on practices of mindfulness of breathing. And of course, many of you, or most of you, would be already familiar to the intricacies of such practices, to the beauty that's present in the manifold forms of such practice, because Lama Alam Wallace teaches these with such brilliance and such clarity on many occasions. Some people might have also benefited from many other teachers who present these practices with a lot of detail. For example, the great late Vietnamese master Thich Nhat Hanh has wonderful books on mindfulness of breathing, including a book in which he comments on the Buddha's discourse on mindfulness of breathing. I think that book's called Breathe, You Are Alive. So, connecting to that, exploring all of that can be a very meaningful endeavor. But in this case, specifically for this retreat, I wanted to emphasize this quality of the breath and the earth, the air and the earth, for us being a field of care. Beyond that, as we are slowly approaching our break, which for some of us would be our lunch break, beyond that, we can also deepen or keep deepening that connection to the field of care if we spend some time with the 5 elements, with the natural world, beyond, the human aspect of the natural world, by doing very small and seemingly insignificant things, like indeed sitting in the sun, or taking a hot shower, or just connecting to the earth that's holding us and mentally attending to it, allowing it to hold us truly with some awareness from our side. Once again, to refer to the beautiful teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, he has a famous quote that became a cultural meme and is being reposted on the internet over and over again. And that it goes along the lines of, I don't see walking on water as a miracle. I think the true miracle is to walk on earth, meaning to walk on earth mindfully, to truly be present with the earth. And on some occasions, he used this idea of kissing the earth with our feet. So connecting to the 5 natural elements as our field of care, and then by extension extending our care to them, to the elements themselves, sort of in a way vowing to protect them, to maintain their balance, to maintain their purity, is a wonderful foundation for all the other practices that we're going to be doing. And it is along these lines that we can spend the break, if we want to, once again playing with our breath, just noticing how it's taking care of us from deep within, and how by attending to it, we can increase the amount of care that we're receiving, because it is mindful awareness towards that breath that allows us to reap the benefits of mindful breathing, quite obviously. If there is mindfulness present, then mindful breathing will bring its benefits. That those benefits will be revealed. But the same for attending to the earth. If we are present with the stillness of the earth, that's how we can receive the benefits of being present with the earth and experiencing stillness. And we will play with stillness in our next session, actually. And then the same, of course, for establishing a certain degree of contact with warmth, heat, or coolness and coldness, and that entire bandwidth is the element of fire. And the same for cohesion, and therefore for something flowing, for fluidity. Cohesion is the main quality that's associated with water in this Buddhist periodic table of elements, so to say. So noticing any sort of cohesion within our body or in the world around us where things flow. We open the tap and there's some flowing water that's there to support and to sustain our body. Wow, how incredible. Attending to all those things in small ways and playing with them and feeling like, hey, I am surrounded by the 5 elements and I can connect to them in a way that would sustain and nourish and protect my body. And this is the foundation for my retreat, and that it's the bubble made out of these 5 elements that's holding me. My meditation nest consists of the 5 elements. And it's also my internal retreat house, the retreat house of this body, which is a concept that is quite common in the Buddhist tradition, but was also, amongst others, used by the great contemplative Jigme and Longchenpa, great masters of the Dzogchen tradition. Jigme, I believe, in particular, said it's within the retreat house, retreat hut of the body, that the mind abides in retreat. So this very body made of earth and water and fire and air and space, this is my retreat bubble within which I undertake these contemplative practices. So while establishing a foundation for all the other practices that we're about to do, I might as well notice some of that air energy that's particularly helpful for releasing, for balancing, for establishing a certain degree of ease. I might notice the earth elements that's holding me and the solidity of the earth throughout my body. And if I want to play with fire and water as well, that's also doable. But especially if we can spend a few moments here and there, 30 seconds here, 60 seconds there, noticing the flow of our breath, this will be a wonderful addition to the ensuing break that we're about to begin right now. So, it is important to take these breaks. It is important to enjoy them, to be playful, but also to feed our body and to drink and so forth. All these different things that would be acts of self-care and therefore acts of self-kindness. So please enjoy the break, but if you can add these different elements to them, and in this particular case, a bit of mindful breathing, just a tiny bit here and there, that would be a meaningful addition to our joint process, our collective process of establishing self-kindness. And we will build on that in the next session by exploring practices that will not only continue supporting us in maintaining a firm foundation, but also already help us to release some of the obstacles to self-kindness. So that's the cliffhanger for now. Please enjoy your break, and we will see each other in, I believe, an hour and a half. See you soon.